Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here for part 3 of a 4-part digitization series, sponsored by PayFast, supported by Business Day SME Matters. A big thank you and a big shout out to PayFast. During this period of COVID, during a difficult time, during a time where, unless as a business you have found a digitization route or angle, things would have been far tougher than otherwise. It really has mattered, providing insight, information, education, opportunity, and action right through the digitization of your businesses per se. The first part was really about services and how digitization kills distance. We looked at a South African firm, born and bred in the Pretoria heartland, finding itself now in the center of the United States with the business 3 times the size that it has in South Africa, simply because it got its digitization strategy right. The second part was about building out an e-commerce capability, a deep industrial business that one would never think should have an e-commerce capability built out live in our event, a digitization platform, an e-commerce platform. And today, therefore, it makes perfect sense. How do we now market the e-commerce capability we have built into our business? It is a tough subject. It is a difficult subject. And for that reason, again, thank you, PayFast. I really appreciate you providing the opportunity for us to reach an enormous audience, a meaningful audience that makes up the engine of the South African economy. I have with me a couple of guests. And my guests were hard to find because I had to find people who, I'm sorry guys, but they're all complete digital nerds, deep nerds, almost born out of bits and bytes and born out of code before anything else. And the reason we needed purists in many ways is because the purists will see what works and what doesn't work, but we also needed to work with pragmatists. My name is Pavlo Phitidis. I'm a co-founder of Aurik, which is a business growth service that we offer to 2,700 businesses across 5 continents as of today. And with me, I have, in my top right corner, Musa Kalenga, a banker. I'm joking. Musa is a deep digital nerd. He currently works at Bridge Labs, Brave Group of companies, and African Tech Roundup. He has been in the digital space forever and a day, has worked with Facebook inside and now outside. And Musa, thank you very much for giving up time. Really good to have you with us. I then have Kathryn Sharfman. Kathryn, she is a member of the CMO, Chief Marketing Organization. She worked with Tencent, which we've heard a lot about recently, one of the Naspers investments in part. And she is now on the outside of the platform too, in effect, selling South African sunlight into very cold European climates. And then, although it's very early in the morning, I managed to get Aidan Baigrie to join us out of California. It's about 2 a.m. in the morning, 3 a.m. in the morning. Aidan, I really appreciate you coming on board and being with us. He was deep in Facebook. He headed up the health elements or the health sector and industry play in Facebook for some time. And he too is now on the outside of one of the biggest social media platforms, working in the space of healthcare, no doubt. Gentlemen, my lady, thank you so much for making time to join us. We are going to get straight into it. Digital marketing. Where do we begin? Maybe we should start with, what does marketing mean? Musa, what are your thoughts?
Thank you very much for that, Pavlo, and great to be here. I think marketing, as a lot of people will understand, has been given a bad rap for the longest time. For me, it's actually quite simple. Marketing is the art of being able to get new customers and to get more out of your existing customers. And if you understand those 2 levers, you can start to realize the value that marketing can actually bring.
Kath, do you agree with that? Get new customers. I thought get new customers was a sales thing.
Yeah, so I do think like customers are the most important thing. I like to describe marketing in general as the yang to your product and your services. If you think in yin and yang ways, you have to have a thorough understanding of the business, your marketplace, your customers, and it's two-way. So you learn a lot from your environment, and you take that back into the business too.
Aidan, would you agree with that? Is it all about an engagement with the market that you're hoping to sell your stuff to?
Yeah, Pavlo, I love what Kathryn said, actually, because it's about listening back. And if you can create that feedback loop, marketing can inform the central strategy, sales strategy, and design of your business rather than just being an outward-facing channel. So I love that.
So I guess then the starting point, if we're going to talk digital marketing as a business, is I need to know who my customers are. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they want to learn about my product. So how do I get that right? If I know who my customers are and I have a product or service, how do I bridge the relationship between the two of them when I talk marketing?
Well, I mean, if you get a good sense of who your customers are, then you should have an intimate understanding of the kind of problems they're trying to solve, the things that they face in their life. And some of those things, unfortunately, may not actually pertain to your product at all. But that holistic understanding really is the starting point. What online platforms and what technology allows you to do, it allows you to color in the lines to get a better and more nuanced appreciation of those problems. And with that appreciation, I think it informs your marketing strategy to become that much more relevant. Now, in a world where you can spray and pray and hope for the best, there's a lot of temptation to do that. But with the integration of technology with marketing, you can become a lot more precision focused on being able to get the right outcome based on knowing your audience.
So, Kath, this is where digital platforms become useful, because if I know who my market is and I can define them, and I know what I do and I can see how it solves a problem for them, is this where the early stage interaction, live interaction, can take place on a digital platform between myself as a business owner and my customers? And in doing that, am I doing that to tell them about me, or am I doing that to learn about them?
Yeah, I mean, to continue a theme, it is very much two-way. And you need to spend time in the shoes of your customers or different types of customers that you might be relevant for. And I think it's really important to understand the touch points, the various digital touch points, and what the mindset is when you're in that space, because you might be in browsing, relaxing mode, or you might be very much intent focused and task orientated. And it's really understanding that in the bridging.
Oh my word. So how would I know if Pavlo's actively buying or Pavlo's just browsing, looking at, I don't know, how to sharpen a blade or MMA or whatever the case might be, whatever's his interest? How would I know when I create an opportunity to engage digitally with him?
So it's very much about understanding how those different platforms work and their primary use. And obviously you have much broader platforms that have business and social, for example, or informal personal life stuff as well as business stuff. But there are definitely key purposes of different channels that you can get your head around for your particular customer base.
So Aidan, listen, you were long in the tooth with Facebook. Are you an absolute Facebook ambassador at this point in time? Or do you have a view on Facebook is good for reaching audience A, LinkedIn, for example, is good for reaching audience B? What platforms would you look at, and what are really the main differentiators between them in terms of how users of those platforms like to engage with them?
Pavlo, thanks. Yeah, my relationship with Facebook in terms of now being an independent business owner and marketer is still very strong. And I feel I was fortunate enough to understand some of the complexities that come out of digital marketing through my time there. I think that very clearly you need to know, and we've spoken about already, who your audience is and know which channels those audiences are spending their time on. I think there's a very clear delineation for me as to when I would go to LinkedIn, when I would dive into search. which is something that we use more now, but also when I would go to Facebook. But I would say to you that one of my most powerful takeaways from my time there was that you need to see it as you would other media platforms, which is a pay-to-play and target reach and frequency kind of platform, as opposed to seeing it as a social, deeply intertwined, building a relationship and a fan base kind of platform. And I think if you treat the digital platforms with the same rigor and requirements that you would other media platforms, that is the standard to which you should hold them, and which brings in the interesting discussion around how do we measure and how do we deem something to be successful or not.
Okay, that's a very interesting point, because this is what I was told. This is what I was sold, rather, a number of years back. I was sold the following across all the digital platforms. They said to me, Pavlo, no, they didn't, but they implied, Pavlo, if you go and you make a good investment in content, and you promote content on our platform, whether it be YouTube, whether it be Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, over time you will build an audience, call them friends, call them connections, call them followers. And over time, what that means for you as a growing business is you have an already audience based on your own development that you've invested time, energy, and effort in creating. And when you have an opportunity, you can post an offer to them and they will respond back to you. They might even engage with you and help you shape the offer to be a better offer. Musa, is that true? Based on what Aidan just said, this pay-to-play story, how does it work?
So there's an element of truth to that. And I'm going to drop in the "it depends" line. But I will say that, I see it as kind of three horsemen. And each of those horsemen has got a very clear devil and a very clear angel. The first horseman is the one that you referred to around content. The content that you need to develop absolutely needs to be appealing to the people it's going out to. But at the same time, that piece of content is competing with thousands, if not hundreds of other pieces of content for the attention of the same individual. The second horseman is the platform that you choose. And we've spoken about how important it is to align that to be able to speak to the target audience that you're looking at. And those platforms are changing all the time. And so if those platforms are changing all the time based on being able to optimize their own business equation, there's also a devil there, because you're going to have to keep up to speed with what's going to be happening with that horseman. The last horseman is targeting. And targeting ultimately is a great way for you to get a clear view of who you're trying to speak to. The problem is that over time, as people change and as things shift, is your targeting still relevant, or should you keep updating it as you go along? And so if you think about the content, the platform, and the targeting as the three horsemen, the major question is for people who didn't understand how those horsemen interacted, they may have found themselves over-investing in one and not necessarily the other, or they might have fallen prey to one of the devils of those horsemen and not knowing potentially how to deal with it. So companies that went and over-invested and got 1 million likes and realized that had actually zero bearing on their business, on the business outcome, over-invested in one of the horsemen but didn't spend time on the others. So I think between the three of them, it's important to understand the interplay and how they work as levers to be able to optimize your outcome, as opposed to focusing entirely on one of them, hoping for the best.
Isn't there a fourth horseman though, and that's called a budget?
Yeah, that's not a horseman. That's the god.
That's horse speed.
That's the god of the horses. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think by and large, it's a play to play. We have to be realistic about the fact that a platform like Facebook, as an example, started out with the honest ambition of wanting to connect the world. I remember, in my time when I was still there, the questions that were being asked before the IPO were, how is Facebook going to make money? Very rudimentarily, everybody was saying, well, sell people's information. And the decision they made was a very elegant way to monetize the platform. But the reality is it ended up being a pay-to-play model. They started using information to inform how algorithms would better target people. And so budgets become really important because it's a bidding-based system, and so is Google. So if you're going to put money on the table, the attention is going to go to the highest bidder. And if the highest bidder is not you, then unfortunately, yes, there is a fourth horseman which you need to be very aware of.
Kath, how do you compete with that? How does a small business compete with a conglomerate or an enormous business if it all works on bidding? Because he or she, with the bigger budget then wins, correct?
Yeah, and I think you have to be smart. The smaller the budget you have, the fewer choices you should really make. You should really consolidate your efforts and be very confident in the platforms you do invest in. And I think there are smart ways to allocate budgets and certainly control budgets. And I think it's really important that anything you go into, you have a very sharp idea of what success looks like. You know, what am I looking for? What life stage is my business at? Am I looking to build my brand, or am I looking for good leads? You know, am I looking for engagement in order to educate the market about what I do? Or am I looking for real through traffic to my e-commerce site so that I can build a member base, for example, or I can measure my sales? So yeah, budget helps actually, and it sharpens your brain so that you're serving both your business and your customer.
Okay, but then I want to add another horseman. I'm determined to add another horseman to Moose's 3. And that's got to be the intent, the campaign, the content. Some content will build a brand, some content will engage, some content will sell, correct? How do you determine which content is right for which platform? And do all 3 or 4 or 5 platforms lend themselves to all 3 of those activities, brand building, engagement, and selling?
I don't believe so. I don't think it's easy to make sweeping statements about what's right for a business. I think it's very unique to each business, both what they do themselves, who they're appealing to, and critically what's life stage they're at. So yeah, there's no one size fits all in that regard, which sounds a bit wishy-washy. I think if there was a 4th horseman, it would be, you know, doing right by the business and the brand. So not creating stuff that's not relevant, you know, not being on the wrong platforms, and not targeting for the sake of targeting, that you're just missing the mark completely. But yeah, brand for me is really important because it positions you correctly.
Okay, we've got a great question that's come through here. And incidentally, folks, please send questions through. You have got 3 experts online over here who have deep, deep knowledge over here. They have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and what works and what doesn't work. Capitalize on the opportunity, take advantage of them. Based on what you just said, Kathryn, Aidan, perhaps you can answer this question. It's from Marita Spannenberg. She says, how do you figure out who your customers are when your business is online only, which is exactly the business you're in right now?
Yeah, I think, you know, I can speak to how we did it from a digital perspective. And I think that is one of the powerful elements behind digital, is you have that ability to create that feedback loop. I think that there are a couple of ways to it. How we used to do it at Facebook was that we were able to link the conversions and the purchases that happened onto your site back to profiles, and you were able to generate insights on that. So you were able to say, you know, we've had 2,000 or 500 people purchase over the last month. And you were able to gather aggregated data on the back of that in terms of demographic and location. And that is one of the powerful elements of digital, which has made them so disruptive in the media and marketing space. So I think that's one way to do it. And the other way, of course, is to engage with your customers. And part of that is generating communication points throughout your purchase funnel, whether that's ability to provide comments or feedback or follow-up questionnaires. All of those elements can allow you to build profiles. But I think it is so essential in e-commerce to make sure that you've got that feedback loop and you know what's going on, especially if you're spending money in digital, because digital marketing works most effectively in e-commerce when you're able to plug the output, those people who are buying your product, back into the engine that helps you select who to target. And that can be done automatically with almost all the digital platforms now. Gather the learnings, inform the engine, and the engine will start to target almost on your behalf. So this is getting to a very interesting part of digital, where part of it, you start with defining your own audience, but you actually evolve that based on your successes. And I think that is a very powerful element.
Musa?
Yeah, I think I'd like to just add on to that, because the learning really about building and profiling and developing an understanding of your customer needs to be founded on the fact that platforms like Google and Facebook were able to evolve into the monsters that they are because they decided to double down on identity. So before Facebook and Google were around, it wasn't mainstream to necessarily know a lot about people that were online. In fact, the standard before then was cookies. So people used to follow you around by looking at the cookie trail that you'd leave all over the internet, which effectively is a way that they could kind of piece together your journey and try and understand a lot about you. What cookies do, unfortunately, is they don't give you an intimate understanding of the individual. They may give you an understanding of where they've been and what they've done, but when it comes down to the nuance of how you can influence behavior or how you can influence their understanding of your brand, cookies don't do that. There are certain platforms that still rely on cookies, but the evolution has been towards more identity-based marketing. And so that's where the gray area came in, with platforms like Facebook and Google solving for that by and large. And in so doing, that innovation loop creating other problems relating to identity and the ethics behind being able to market someone based on understanding exactly who they are. So that's a really important thing to land, because there are certain platforms out there that effectively will still, tell you that they're cookie based in the way they're trying to target people. But you need to understand that cookies can sometimes either overestimate your reach or underestimate your reach. So in the case that if you happen to be downtown Braamfontein and you're looking at one computer console and there's 50 students that keep coming through it, you're going to think it's one person with a really schizophrenic browsing history. Versus, a person like yourself, Pavlo, who's got a mobile desktop, you got a phone, and you got a laptop, which is one person across 3 different devices. So it's one user journey. So that understanding of cookies versus profiles is really important as a starting point if you're going to use online and technology to try and build a profile of your customer. So it's really, really important that you have a difference between how you're going to do that based on identity or based on behavior.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to turn all this talk into walk. And we're going to create 3 businesses. We're going to build out a digital strategy for 3 businesses. I'll share the first business because in this, I think that we will answer a lot of the questions that are coming through. Heinrich, very nice question for Aidan on Facebook. Kerry, very nice question for Kathryn in terms of brand and deciding the social media platform mix. Josh, I like old school. Your question over here, we have a good hit rate using traditional email marketing. Is this an exception to the rule? Absolutely not, but we'll get into it. And Mina, yes, Google My Business. In your own views, what do you think are the benefits of this platform aimed at Musa? We're going to tackle all of those now. So guys, are you ready? In 5 to 6 minutes, we're going to build out a digital strategy. I want to know which platform I should use. Who will it be serving? How will it work? How do I reach my audience? What kind of content should I be sending out? And how do I build a campaign? So the first example is well, I'm not really, but for the purposes of illustration, I am a dressmaker and a really good one. Look at these hands. Can you see them with a needle and a crochet stick and doing whatever it needs to do? And I have gone and created, I've got a very particular style of clothing. I've got a good eye for it. I'm a dressmaker. I have been going for about 3 years, 4 years in my own bat. It started off late at night when I was working in a corporate environment. And over time, I've built up a small customer base. And now I do bespoke outfits. And I have decided as a dressmaker to focus on corporate wear. Because in the corporate environment, specifically a white-collar professional services space, I want to make dresses for women and some men who might want dresses. In the corporate space, where do I even begin in creating my digital strategy, Kath?
So it's interesting, corporate wear in the time of a pandemic, but it'd be maybe just the top half, not the bottom half, that's important. I would be I would go straight for the specific channels that lend themselves very well to both e-commerce and visual representations of a product. So I would be looking at something like Instagram. That would be my go-to, certainly with a small budget. We're talking about somebody who doesn't have a lot of, has an identified budget, but like it's not
about 5,000 Rand, 3,000 to 5,000 Rand a month.
Yeah, so again, picking up on a theme from earlier, you can't be everywhere. You need to be very razor focused on where you spend your efforts. And Instagram is really important that you have really great photography and video if you can afford it. So I would be leveraging whatever I'm using on my e-commerce site. I'm already creating imagery for that site. So actually moving into that platform should have quite a low entry production cost, if you like. And I would probably focus my efforts there. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
Aidan, what would you do when you buy your dress from me? Where would you be looking? How would you be thinking? How would you be behaving?
Are you putting me in the consumer side of the equation? It's hard for me to start any conversation buying a dress from you, Pavlo. But I think, no, you know, my instinct, I wrote down 2 notes as soon as you asked the question. I just wrote e-com and visual. And I think Instagram came straight to the front for me as well. That's not to say that Instagram may be your only channel. I think email marketing, to the question that came through, is really a very powerful channel that I always underestimated. But the challenge there is you need the success first. You need those emails in. You need to have that completed cycle. I think the other element with Instagram is you get to build your brand. We spoke about the funnel earlier, but you build your brand and your identity. You start to get a feel based on interactions there as to the learnings around how people interact and perceive your brand. And that can draw you very nicely down the funnel to the e-commerce conversion side. So really, I think in that space is a perfect one-stop shop. You can go at the budget that suits you. And then I think augment that with anything you can do around press and media and PR and any other ways that you can drive and generate some awareness of your product outside of Instagram. But that would be a very clear focus for me.
2 things you said over there that stuck out for me. The first thing is that a social media platform is not the only channel you should be using. You need to be marketing across a collection of different communication methods. But more importantly, when you said, I would have no idea where to begin buying a dress from you, that is absolutely key to me, because one thing that we all miss is when we have our customers and when our customers land, ask your customer, do you work with Instagram? Do you use Facebook? How do you use it? How do you use LinkedIn? How do you use Google? Because if we can understand from people who are buying from us, in other words, our real customers, how our customers are behaving, Musa, am I right? That's the early stage of creating a campaign that will find more people like me if I'm a customer of yours.
Yeah, so the only addition I would make to what Aidan and Kath have said is that I would probably test on Facebook and Instagram simultaneously, simply because my experience that Facebook has got a lot more top of the funnel relevance than Instagram. So if you can, trying to build awareness. So to your point, if I know about you, then Instagram is great. If I don't know about you, then maybe not so much. Not only from a reach potential, but also in the nuances of targeting. So targeting based on behaviors, targeting based on inclination, et cetera, I find to be a stronger engine on Facebook. So I would use Facebook to do the top of the funnel, to try and at least create the custom audience, which effectively is a grouping of consumers. And then as much as possible, try and get them onto Instagram to be able to take them through from demand generation to completion. It's also pretty useful that Facebook and Instagram are fairly well integrated. So it's not from an ad platform perspective, you're not taking, to completely different experiences. So that's the only thing I would add. And once again, the nuance of making sure that the fulfillment is likely to happen on Instagram, because to Aidan's point, it's a highly visual, and I see the dress, I like the dress, I press buy, versus getting people to know who you are and then sending them to a place where they're more comfortable to visualize and purchase.
So, Kath, Musa raises a very interesting question. Am I sending pictures of the dresses I've made, or am I talking about why it's important to dress professionally and how to dress appropriately, whether it be in financial services or hospitality or technology? And I am largely, to a large degree, a woman that feels as if I'm in a man's world, and I want to deepen my understanding of power dressing because it may well help me advance my career. What is the communication that I'm sending out there when it comes to building a brand?
So, we're moving now into content, really, I think. And I think it's really important that whatever content you create serves your purpose. And I don't think by and large brands do really well if they just push sales all the time. It's effectively, if it's a product I can buy, it's, you know, you always pressing the buy button. Obviously that's important in the retail business, but it's not the only way that you build a relationship with a customer. And actually, yeah, if your purpose is to empower women, largely, predominantly women, to dress more confidently in the workplace, then there are all ways that you can, you know, tips and advice, you can move into more like softer content that isn't even particularly clothing related. You want to stay relatively focused on your product space, but, you know, there could be look books that are created. There could be tips and advice for things beyond clothing. And I think it's just something that is sustainable for you as a brand, that is of interest to your audience space. It's you have to go full circle.
Aidan, how do I convince a customer to show off their outfit to their followers, their connections, their friends, once they've bought it from me? Is there a polite way to do it, a subtle way to do it? Is there a nice way to do it? To say you've bought it, you've worn it, it looks good, you feel good, you're doing well. Please tell the world. Is there a trick to this question to get that customer to do it?
Pavlo, there is. This speaks to what Kath said as well, which is if you build your brand and you're not pushing sales, people will learn to love and appreciate your brand for what it is, and they will want to help you. They will be proud of wearing something that stands for something that they believe in, and that is the point you want to get to. And I think that's what's so important. If I'm envisioning the smaller size business, the temptation is to push for sale. Buy this discount, and your values start to really become the strong call to action. And us as consumers on the internet, and we've seen this globally, it's consistent. If you're asked to buy something where you haven't built the association with the brand, with the appreciation or the upper funnel appreciation and awareness, it can really become a blocker. You really want to take someone down a path so that when they do convert, you've built up the kind of relationship for someone who's going to want to post an image and hashtag your brand there and say, hey, this is where I got it, if you like it.
So what you're saying is, if I love you and I buy you flowers, you'll acknowledge the flowers rather than just receive the flowers if I don't love you.
Again,
guys, I want to move on because of time. We've just got a great message over here from Sianda, who said, thank you, Pavlo, for asking this question, being considerate of my line of business as a dressmaker. Thank you so much. I'm empowered through this platform. It's our collective absolute pleasure. Musa, are you ready for number two? Number two, and now don't look at me in an uninteresting way, because let's remind everybody, you were a banker. You were a banker. Okay. So now I am an accountant, and I run an accounting practice. And I am a growing accounting practice. I have about 350 odd clients. I offer tax consulting to personal individuals. I help them with their income returns. I offer bookkeeping capabilities to some SMEs, and I do 1 or 2 audits and some assurance work for medium to large size businesses. And I have a team of around 35, 40 odd staff. Where do I even begin? Selling an intangible service across a consumer and business market.
Sure. So I think, maybe just from a practical perspective is I'd set aside 3,000 to 5,000 Rand as a kitty for us to just experiment over 1 to 3 months, right? So put that money aside with no ambition that it's going to do anything for you aside from giving you knowledge and insight as a starting point. The second thing is when you start thinking about how you approach your customer, it's important that you take 3 things into account. The first is once you've been able to do the exercise of being able to create a very clear picture of who you're speaking to, you may also realize that the kind of creative and the kind of content you need to develop may not necessarily sit within your business. So the investment I would make is to partner with a freelance copywriter and a freelance creative, or someone that can graphically design stuff. When you're in a service business, it is so difficult to visualize some of the things you're talking about. And the great mistake is you go online and you're going to find yourself some stock imagery of people shaking hands, and that's kind of your value proposition, right? And that's mistake one, because you're going to look like everybody else and you're not going to be able to resonate. So when you're in a service business, you need to get probably an external view of people that can create content that speaks to your core function and the problem that you solve based on the profile that you've created. Take the learnings out of the first 3 months that you spent experimenting with targeting on a platform like LinkedIn, I would say, and a platform like Facebook, and then use those learnings to be able to build up a broader campaign. The last thing I would do is to ensure that all along the journey, you're being able to test some of these things with your customers. So you probably have a fairly good relationship with the people that you serve. And it's really important to bring them into confidence and take them on the journey as well with you. There's nothing more rewarding than getting your customers to either confirm or to contradict some of the things that you're thinking, right? So you may be, gung-ho about a great campaign that you want to run, and you think it's a wonderful idea. And when you show it to a customer, they kind of go, well, that's not going to land, right? It's a safe space to be able to take risks and leverage the relationship before you actually make the blunders that a lot of people do by being too quick to put stuff out into the world, and it just doesn't resonate.
So, Kath, I saw you nodding your head there with regard to the platforms that Musa was suggesting. Facebook on the one hand, LinkedIn on the other hand, and working with customers to create the campaign. What are your thoughts on the platforms?
I agreed. I mean, I wrote down the same too, Snap. I also added Google, and I think it's a massive ecosystem. But I think it's important to understand you're building a brand and you're building, you're maybe joining a conversation, adding some value into the space of Facebook and LinkedIn. But I think it's important that you understand that it's a service that will be search task orientated. So making sure that your website's very easy to find. There's a whole myriad of tactics. I would definitely carve out certainly some housekeeping into my budget for that, because there's no better sale to be had if somebody's looking for your specific services. And you can purpose content very well for Facebook and for LinkedIn. I agree with Musa highly. Again, setting out what your purpose is, so that how you differentiate yourself with your content, so it backs up your story. And I've got lots of ideas actually for content, but to your point about customer, it was as relevant for the dressmaker as it is here. You can't actually, there's no magic formula for getting people to talk about you unless they've had an amazing experience with you.
Can you have an amazing experience with a tax instance? You can, Musa, but do you want to tell the world? That's the question.
No, you might not, but if you ever do, you want to look good while you're doing it, right? So the only thing I'd add on that is I think the importance of a web platform for a service business, right? I think your website becomes extremely important. Number one, your professional service. So people that are coming to you are probably wanting to get a holistic picture, and there's nothing more disconcerting than searching for a service, especially a specialized service, and not finding them online, only on social media. So I would say that your social platforms are great, but I think they would almost be in a very funny way kind of secondary to your web presence, right? Your web presence still has the job of landing professionalism, still has the job of landing a place I can trust, and still has the job of being able to build the perception that my money is not going to go into a black hole. Last but not least, the integration of your what they call pixels, right? So, to be able to draw the link between what's happening on your social platforms and your website, you need to put a Google pixel as well as a Facebook pixel on your website. So I think the web asset is also something not to forget for this kind of business.
Excellent. Aidan, let me ask you a question here. Because if I think about it, as a private individual, I have 2 tax instances in the year. Am I constantly being marketed to by the accounting service with the view to build trust in between the 2 tax events? Or am I only going to be running my campaign a month before the first tax instance and a month before the next tax instance? And if I'm doing that, Aidan, is it different content in both instances?
Pavlo, I mean, it's such a great question. It's such a tough one with a finite budget. I think in the ideal world, you build brand through the year. without major call to action. It's really just building what makes you unique. And then as you hit tax season and you work out, not necessarily tax season, but when people are thinking and planning for tax season, you would hit them with call to actions. I want to just backstep one little piece, because I think it's so hard, given this is a B2B business, to understand how to use somewhere like Facebook, which is this consumer-driven platform, to find your audiences. And I would just go back and to elaborate a little bit on Musa's example on the targeting side of it, which is you can target on these digital platforms by geography and by time of year. And my interest group. And I just think my instinct was to go to LinkedIn for targeting for this B2B service. But I think where Facebook's very powerful is two things, just to link it in. The one is that anyone who's visited your website, you can then target them through digital, through the pixels, which Musa's suggesting you're installing. But two, also, is you're able to use geographic targeting. So what you could do is target anyone who's in Braamfontein over a certain period of time or commutes there to help narrow your audience. So it isn't just hey, I'm on social media. It's I'm in social media during work hours when people are arriving or departing work. And that's when I'm serving the ad for my business. Because with a budget like this, you need to be really laser focused. And then Pavlo, to sort of close up and wrap up on your question there, in terms of when during the year, I would probably focus more towards when this is top of mind. I think it's hard to build a tax brand through the year. I think it's very much a timing element, and you want to hit people at a time of year when they need your help and show that you understand them, so that when they see your ad, it's bringing out some kind of awareness of the challenges they face.
Fantastic. Ayanda Mbalati, I hope this answered your question that you sent to Musa. Which platforms would you recommend? LinkedIn and or Google if we were a B2B services business? We should have covered that. We're going to move on to our last case study. Okay, are you ready? I am a national business and I sell the most boring things you can imagine. They're the bits and pieces that are used to balance wheels. So my clients are all over the country, called tire fitment centers. I manufacture these really boring things, which are absolutely critical in keeping you safe on the road as a commuter, as a car owner, as a driver. And I need to, on a constant basis, grow presence of my products and services, selling to tire fitment centers, selling to farmers as well during the irrigation season as they get their big irrigation systems up and running that run on tires, selling into industry that owns fleets, selling into car rental agencies that look after the tires of the products and cars that they have. That's my business. I have around 120 people in my team. I do about 18 million a year in revenues, and I have created an e-commerce capability. I now want to grow my business. Musa, where am I going to start?
So try and make your business more exciting would be the starting point. No, I'm just joking. I think my go-to would be, I think, Google in particular, and display advertising. I think Google, is a great way because the product that you have is quite specific and quite niche. Ultimately, people might be searching for it because they know exactly what they want. I'd consider your competitor set. So if you've got a strong competitor set and you actually have to do the job of brand building to kind of fight for share of mind, I think that's important to consider. But if you've got a fairly kind of narrow or very closed off sector, then I'd focus on Google and display ads. I also think for this kind of business, because the kind of stuff that you sell isn't the sexiest thing you're going to find anywhere, I think it's important to start thinking about potentially engaging an agency, right? An agency that can kind of add a little bit of pizzazz to the messaging that you're going to be sending out, to align that to your brand and make sure that there's clarity when someone engages with you in any of the platforms. But more importantly, to spend time investing in not only your static media but your video content. I think it's going to be really important important for people to start understanding how the product comes to life and how it works. And often this is difficult to do internally. Yes, I know you probably have a camera and you try and shoot your workshop and get everybody excited, but I do think there's a wonderful opportunity here to partner with an agency that can help you to kind of bring that element of excitement to the product and to the business.
Kath, I mean, do people in the heavy industrial B2B space, are they reachable? Or would you, in effect, digitally pavement pound in order to create new groups or new identities of people in the Tire Fitment Center? Because I'm thinking you've got very, very different buying behaviors. You've got the Tire Fitment Center owner, where there's an immediacy of need. You've got the procurement head of a big car rental agency. You've got, I'm guessing, the farmer out in the sticks, and you have the mine manager or head of procurement or head of global supply chain in the mines. How do you create the right content in those environments? How should your thinking be shaped by the buying behavior in relation to creating the appropriate content?
So here you have a very fragmented customer segmentation. And I agree 100%. I would spend a lot of time in the Google space because I think a lot of your customers are going to be very intent-led. They're going to know what they want when they come, to their web interface. But I wouldn't discount something like LinkedIn for the top tier relationships, more corporate relationships. And then I think it's really speaking to the purpose, like what differentiates you. I love Moose's example of like making it a bit more sexy, but what are you really, is it an education piece? Is it innovation? Is it quality that you need to demonstrate? But you need to create different content for different channels. I think on Google, it needs to be as simply to find. You put in a product SKU because you know exactly what you want. And then it's just about efficiency. I need to go very quickly to the page on the website, and then I need to be able to order it, because remember, we're all e-commerce enabled, as opposed to on LinkedIn, where I might showcase some of my product in use, or you might want to meet the team from a quality point of view. Who am I going to be dealing with? And I think we've said it at each stage, but in an e-commerce business, you avoid or ignore email at your peril. It's like super, super important.
Completely. Aidan, is there a different behavior in Facebook users, in this instance, that are based in urban city environments and those that might be based in outlying rural or peri-urban environments? Do people utilize Facebook differently? And would that have an impact on how you would be marketing to the Tire Fitment Center owner, which is normally a private individual who has acquired a franchise of some sort and might employ around 12 to 15 odd people?
Yeah, Pavlo, I wouldn't say it's different Facebook usage. I would almost just say you're targeting different types of people and who have different needs in a sort of peri-urban environment versus sitting in a metro. And I think I would adjust my communication accordingly if I was targeting people out in farming areas or I was targeting in different parts. So again, it goes back to knowing your customer, who they are. I would comment that in this case, I think digital marketing is definitely going to be potentially a smaller part of the business than it would be. I think it's a very tough business to nail with digital. But what I would add, and I just want to build on what Musa said, is that it's very easy to think my brand is boring. You're a toilet cleaner sort of product, or you're a tire manufacturer, or you're an insurance or tax side of things. All I always refer back to is I remember the Bookmark Awards in 2016 or 17 when a life insurance company won. And I think that should be an inspiration to everyone, which is one of traditionally the most boring elements to sell in the world is winning awards. And it's really the power of a good creative ad agency there can really help turn your brand into something that shines. So don't be disheartened and think that digital is not for you because your brand is boring. That is the opportunity. Therein lies it.
And I think that's a very, very good point, Mus, what you were making earlier. Yes, the product itself might be boring, but to the extent that you have a passion and a belief in what you do, that very clearly needs to come out in the digital space. especially if it's a social media environment.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, remember, you're not competing with other people that are within your category. You're competing with everybody else. You're competing with Mercedes-Benz. You're competing with Unilever ice creams. So when consumers are looking at advertising, they don't bucket it in sectors. They don't consume, agriculture advertising and then they close the chapter and then consume the sexy stuff. They consume it all at once. So when you're appearing to your customer or the target audience that you're trying to get to, understand that their previous experience, so the previous thing they viewed may have been at a particular level, and therefore the psychological expectation is that much higher for you to meet. So I think it's definitely to view it as an opportunity, but also to be clear about where your internal capability starts and where your internal capability ends, right? So I do know that, when you are in those kind of very specific and technical spaces, there's also a belief that nobody will understand because we understand because we've got the expertise. And to a certain extent, that's correct. But hence the view to partner with an agency over a longer period of time to build the level of understanding so that they can bring that delight into your advertising and your comms.
But I want to just challenge one thing, Aidan, that you said a bit earlier, that perhaps in this business, it might be that digital might be a smaller part of your overall marketing strategy. And I saw Kath nodding there too. Isn't there an opportunity in order to make it more sexy and in order to get your customer to be influenced by your customer's customer? Is there not an opportunity to, with some really good creative, Musa, and Kath, with the right placement and humor, show that these bits and bobs, which attach to the tire to keep it balanced, create a safer, more reliable journey? Is there not a way to cleverly use digital to get your customers asking your customer for your product?
Pavlo, that's your question's a good one. It's always the dream, right? The Intel Inside sticker, which is, you want someone buying your laptop saying, I want an Intel chip inside there. It's really got nothing to do with your consumer, but you've built up the brand. I think that is the dream. The dream is that you go to a tire fitment center and say, I want someone who's fitting my tires, who's using Pavlo's tire wrenches. The reason I've said it's tricky on digital, and it's really about throwing your marketing eggs into one basket, is that your targeting is so particular and your customer base, your actual customer base is so small, given that it's so hard to target the friends and the consumers of the end business, but actually to find the owners of the fitment centers, you'd really need to think about embracing a much broader holistic strategy than relying on digital. There's no easy way to find them outside of a self-advertised LinkedIn, hey, I'm a buyer for a fitment center or a mine, in which case LinkedIn's very powerful there. But I just think it's a really tough audience to nail down digitally without doing a lot of spray and pray, which is fortunately, there's a bigger budget to spend on marketing here. But I think just to be aware of the fact you need to look at other innovative ways to get your brand in front of people.
Excellent. We're going to wrap up very quickly. Musa, some last thoughts?
Yeah, I think to Aidan's point, there are also some really great ways to find efficiencies when you may find yourself in a situation where your audience or your potential customer segment is smaller. So what I find about lots of technical businesses is they tend to be quite good at keeping records of their customers, which is an internal database. And so that can be a very useful asset when you start advertising on these platforms, in that you can use that internal database to actually find out how many of them are on LinkedIn or are on Facebook. And through that process of comparison, you actually cut out the wastage entirely. So they can give you an indication of 70% or 20% of the people that are on your internal database you can reach on these platforms, provided you have an email or a cell phone number. But that's another way you can kind of work around not only being more efficient, but also being quite targeted about who you speak to.
Excellent. Kath, you're nodding furiously again.
No, I mean, we hadn't touched on it, so I'm happy that we fitted in that point. It's really, really important because, no wastage and long-term relationships where people might just need reminders to come back and repeat by. I think it's an incredibly important point.
Excellent. Aidan, Musa, Kath, we're going to wrap up. Time is up, time is out. It felt like we only just got going on a topic, on a subject that is so big and so deep and so profound. There have been so many questions that have come through that we have not had a chance to address. But what I would encourage everyone is please have a look on your chat You will see Musa's LinkedIn, Kath's LinkedIn, Aidan's LinkedIn. Guys, are you happy that people reach out to you, connect with you, engage with you, shoplift a little bit of advice off you every now and then before it turns into a paying enterprise? I hope you are. If you can give me a thumbs up, that would be fantastic. Everyone is welcome to connect to all of us. The last point I want to make is leading up to this event, I made a call on both Facebook and LinkedIn for digital experts. And I said, are you a deep expert in LinkedIn, in Facebook, in YouTube, in Google, in Instagram, in Twitter? And a lot of people responded to that message. So if you are looking for support, if you are looking for what seemed to be a really remarkable crowd of people who gathered around this event, you're more than happy to visit my LinkedIn comments around it and have a look at the lists of people that were suggested and recommended. There was some incredible talent that sits there. PayFast, again, I really thank you for making this possible. I think that we started having a really good conversation, a deep conversation, one that could have gone down a very deep, profound philosophical space, which is what lends itself to this topic. But we hopefully pulled it back, made it very, very practical for a small business, a medium-sized business, and a large business. Please look out for the next event. It'll be the 4th in the series. It'll happen in about a month's time. I have no doubt that Tanya and Stephen and Trevor and their team at SME Matters will be communicating with you around it. Thank you all for giving up the time to be there. Thank you especially to Aidan, who woke up at 1 o'clock this morning, to Musa, who woke up 5 minutes before, and to Kath, who woke up at a regular time of 7 a.m. I thank you all for joining me. Have an entrepreneurial day further, and we'll see you at the next event.